Okay, so after getting completely yeeted yesterday and having to concede within 10 minutes, we have Hypocrite back again. He wants to defend the same proposition that transgenderism is a delusion, and he's muted. I need to unmute him. So, yeah, just go ahead and give your argument, LP.
Yeah, hey, what's up? Can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
All right. Is right?
You cut out, pardon?
I think we need to define what transgender means.
Well, no, what we need from you is just the argument. So if you think that that proposition is true, and you have an argument for it, you can deliver that argument.
Well, the argument would be the same one that you made when you gave your definition of delusion last time.
So what are the premises?
So trans women are not women, I guess would be the premise. And so to believe that is a delusion.
Trans women are not women, therefore transgenderism is a delusion?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's invalid. We could probably make it into a valid argument. Let's see. Let's go. I'll come up with the formalization. You can tell me if you agree with it. So let's go P1. Let's see. How is it that you phrased that? Transgender women aren't women. Okay, so if transgender women aren't women, then if a trans woman believes she's a woman, she's delusional? Is that like the idea?
Sure.
Well, here, I'll type it up and we can see if you agree with the form. Let me just make it into a proper argument. One sec. I'm going to put it in general when I have it done. Okay, there you go. So that's in general. So it's just modus ponens. If transgender women aren't women, then if a trans woman believes she's a woman, she's delusional. Premise 2, transgender women aren't women. Conclusion, therefore, if a transgender woman believes she's a woman, she's delusional. Is that what you're trying to do?
Hold on a sec. Let me just take a quick look.
Okay. You accidentally moved yourself over to the other voice channel, so I just dragged you back here. Don't know if you talked while you were in there.
Yeah, I don't know how to see it. Where do I click on to see the thing?
So
or do you want to just read it to me again?
So what? No, I think you want to see it visually because we want to make sure that we're representing you accurately, right? And if it's not accurate, we're going to dial it in until it is accurate. So what you just did was you clicked the general voice channel. You see how that has a little microphone beside it? You want to click the general text channel, which has a little hashtag beside it.
Right.
And you should see it there.
It.
I can post it again. Yeah. Well, we got Bryn spamming it, so there you go.
If transgender women aren't women...
Yeah, guys, don't spam it. Just here. There it is once so you can read it clearly.
Then if a trans woman believes she's a woman, she's delusional. Sure.
Okay, so there's a few problems with it. Just to point out one, the conclusion isn't that transgender women are delusional. The conclusion is an implication that if a trans woman has a particular belief, she's delusional. That's to set aside problems with the premises.
Okay, but what I was trying to get at is that the definition, that belief is part of the definition of trans woman.
Well, the argument that you've given right here has a... so you want to say all transgender women believe they're... Okay, so we can try to rewrite. Let's see if we can get a rewrite that works a bit better. All right, let's try... if transgender women, all right, by definition, believe they are women, and we'll go, and it's false that they are women, then transgender women are delusional. I'll even help you generalize this to trans people as a whole. Just let me do a bit of work on it, because often what'll happen is when we actually try to take an argument like this, like a bad argument, and then formalize it, it'll just become obvious why it's not making sense by just trying to reach a valid form and sound argument. Transgender women by definition believe they are women, and it's false that they are women. Therefore transgender women are delusional. Okay, so there's one more iteration, but let's try to modify it so we can get to a conclusion that trans people in general are delusional, because that's what you need to get to, right? You need to get to transgenderism is a delusion. If someone is trans, they are delusional. So we could go, if transgender people, so let's get it away from women, if transgender people by definition believe they are I guess, well, this is where the equivocation is going to become obvious, because it depends what you mean by woman or man there. So in fact, let's leave it as it is, and we can try to generalize it later, because what's happening is when I try to generalize it, then when I need to go like, they believe they are woman or man, I can't say woman or man, I need to say the other gender or the other sex, and that's where the equivocation will have to be cleared up anyway. So just with the last formulation here, what do you think of this? If transgender women by definition believe they are women, and it's false that they are women, then transgender women are delusional. Transgender women by definition believe they are women, and it's false that they are women. Therefore, transgender women are delusional. And that should actually say P and Q implies R. That second premise should be P and Q, and the conclusion should be therefore R. Okay, so that's correct there. So how's that argument? Is that what you're trying to say?
Sure.
Okay, so if now obviously the conclusion here is that transgender women are delusional, and we could maybe add a secondary argument and just say something like, let's take the conclusion there, and let's go premise premise one. We'll say if, and then we'll put in that conclusion: transgender women are delusional. Then let's say if transgender women are delusional, then, you know, by parallel reasoning, so are all other trans people, presumably, right? We just run the argument in reverse and switch the words man and woman, and then we'd get that trans men are delusional. Presumably that's not a straw man of your position. Yeah. Okay, so if transgender women are delusional, then by parallel reasoning, so are all other trans people. So I guess we'll go R implies S, and then we'll go premise 2. We'll go transgender women are delusional. Say that's R. And then we'll go conclusion, therefore, by parallel reasoning, so are all other trans people. And that's just equivalent to saying transgenderism is a delusion. There's not a meaningful difference there. If you get to all trans people are delusional, I mean, I don't see a meaningful difference. That's establishing the conclusion that transgenderism is a delusion. If we wanted to be really technical, we could set up a further deduction and say, if all trans people are, well, we could say if by parallel reasoning all other trans people are delusional, then transgenderism is a delusion. Then we can just modus ponens that and get to the conclusion that transgenderism is a delusion. So let's go therefore S, and let's take the prior argument, and let's stack them together to a double syllogism, and there we go. So there's your reasoning, right? So if transgender women by definition believe they are women and it's false that they are women, then transgender women are delusional. That's P and Q implies R. Transgender women by definition believe they are women and it's false that they are women. That's P and Q. Conclusion, therefore transgender women are delusional. Therefore R. So then the second argument is just going to go, if transgender women are delusional, then by parallel reasoning, so are all other trans people. R implies S. It's just taking R, the conclusion of the prior argument. Premise 2, transgender women are delusional. It's already established in the prior argument. That's just R. And then conclusion, therefore, by parallel reasoning, so are all other trans people. Therefore, S. Is this an accurate representation of your argument?
Yeah, yes.
If do you want a minute to read it over? I'm very patient.
No, that is it. That's my argument.
Okay, so there's multiple lines of attack here. One would be that a transgender person doesn't actually require the belief that they are of the other gender or sex. As long as it's true of them, they're trans. They don't have to even believe it. You can be trans without knowing it. So P1, I would say, is false.
You no. So this is where we need to have a definition of transgender.
Well, I'm objecting to your premise 1 right there. When you say, if transgender women by definition believe they are women, and it's false that they are women, then transgender women are delusional. So I'm saying that it's not the case that they by definition believe they're women, right? Transgender person, if you want a definition, is just going to be someone whose gender identity and sex differ. So it's not required that they have a belief about it differing. So that wrecks P1.
Okay, well, the definition I'm using is somebody who identifies as the opposite sex.
You don't need to. I'd reject that. You don't need to identify as trans to be trans.
According to who?
It's just what I take trans to mean. Someone whose gender identity and sex differ. If you're talking about...
There's no such thing as gender identity. That's not even a real thing.
Okay, so let's just make sure we understand where we're at. So right now we've got a double syllogism. I'm objecting to premise 1 of the first argument because it asserts that transgender women by definition believe that they're women. I'm telling you, I could say it's false, or I could just play agnostic, but I would just go as far as to say it's false. They don't need to believe that they're women. It just needs to be the case that their gender identity and sex differ. Now, you want...
A transgender female is a male who identifies as female, or a man who identifies as a woman. That's the definition I would use.
I'd reject that.
Well, I reject your false, made-up idea of gender identity.
Okay, so you're just talking about something else than me. So do you have an argument against what I'm actually saying? Right? Do you have a way to establish trans people are delusional where you're actually talking about the same thing as me when you're talking about a trans person?
Well, we have two different definitions. So your definition isn't even a real thing. How can you empirically measure someone's gender identity, or how can you prove to me that gender identity is a real thing that I should recognize and respect? So
first of all, now you really have a tendency to try to bait me into things, and it's very hard not to do them. But just to get rid of your kind of bogus, like I'm using a proprietary definition thing. I mean, you can literally just hit Wikipedia. Transgender people have a gender identity or gender expression that differs from their sex assigned at birth.
You sure you want to go with Wikipedia?
Definition seems fine to me.
Okay, I clicked on trans woman on Wikipedia, and the first line of it reads, a trans woman is a woman who was assigned male at birth.
Okay. Woman there probably refers to gender.
Okay, well, that's delusional.
What's the delusion?
A woman is an adult human female.
So when we look at your argument here, if transgender women by definition believe they are women, and it's false that they are women, then transgender women are delusional. When you say transgender women by definition believe that they are women, that's not true. You could be trans without knowing it.
No, you can't. It's part of the definition. A trans is somebody who identifies as the opposite sex. That's what it means.
No, it's just someone whose gender and sex differ. Now, if you're just talking about some other thing, it's not what I'm arguing with you about. Do you actually have an argument against transgenderism as I'm using the term?
There is no such thing as gender.
Wait, so I want to be clear about what we're saying. So when I object to your first premise by saying that it's not the case that a transgender woman by definition believes that they are a woman, do you understand that, or do you not understand that?
I understand that we're operating off of different definitions, and yours is incorrect.
So you're attacking no. You're attacking a position that's not my position, right? Transgender person doesn't have to identify. They don't have to know that they're trans. You can be trans without knowing you're trans.
Right, but that's my position.
Oh, so you're just talking about something else to me. So do you actually have an argument against my position or not?
Well, I think that if we're going to have a fundamental disagreement about what a trans person is, we should settle that in order to settle the debate. Wouldn't you agree?
No, I just say you're talking past me, right? So if you actually have a criticism of the word as I'm using it, if you're going to show that what I mean when I say a trans person, which is someone whose gender identity and sex differ, entails being delusional, then I want to hear the argument for that. So far, you've just delivered an argument that assumes that trans people have to have the belief that they are women. And we haven't even clarified the fact that you're obviously equivocating between gender and sex in there. I'm not even addressing that yet. I'm just saying they don't even need to have a belief at all, right? If their gender identity and sex differ, they're trans. So the first premise is just straightforwardly false.
There's no such thing as gender identity, Isaac. It's not a real thing. It's just a made-up concept to validate the delusion.
So when I tell you that by transgender, I mean someone whose gender identity and sex differ, right? Do you have an argument that someone whose gender identity and sex differ is delusional?
There's no such thing as gender. You're delusional for believing that gender identity is a real thing.
Okay, so you're trying to say let's see if we can make an argument of that, right? So when I tell you that
hold on.
One second. No, we're going to be systematic.
Don't type out another essay.
We're going to be systematic.
We're
going to be systematic, right? We want to find out if what you're saying actually makes sense. That's why we use things like formal logic, right? So your premise one says if transgender women by definition believe they're women, then it's false that they are women. Now, I'm telling you, a transgender woman does not need to have the belief that they're a woman. If their gender identity and sex differ, then they're trans.
That's not what a trans woman is.
Do you have an argument against the term, do you have an argument that transgender people are delusional that doesn't equivocate on transgenderism, let alone equivocate also on gender identity and sex, which we can talk about? Right? You know what I'm talking about when I talk about transgenderism. I'm talking about someone whose gender identity and sex differ. Do you have an argument that can show that someone whose gender identity and sex differ is delusional?
How do you empirically measure somebody's gender identity in order to know that it differs?
You love to ask questions whenever I push you in a corner. Do you have an argument that shows that if someone's gender identity and sex differ, they are delusional?
That's like asking me if I have an argument that shows that the fucking flying spaghetti monster isn't the same thing as the rainbow Christmas tree. There's no such thing as gender identity, Isaac. It doesn't exist.
Do you understand?
You can't measure it. You can't test for it.
We're just talking about gender.
There's no such thing as gender either, as far as I'm concerned.
Gender is just going to be like the sort of group of characteristics that are typically associated with sex. So there's like a lot of them are like behavioral or psychological.
Right. So I can accept that definition, but then that's irrelevant. If you say I'm a woman, you're not saying I use a woman's gender. You're saying I'm a woman. So
a trans woman doesn't.
The idea of gender
a trans woman doesn't.
Irrelevant.
You keep going to this, right? A transgender woman doesn't need to say she's a woman. If her gender identity and sex differ, she's trans. She doesn't have to have a belief that they differ. She could be trans, and she could be delusional about not being trans.
It's in the definition on Wikipedia, and you wanted to use Wikipedia. Like, a trans woman is the first line of the entry of trans women on Wikipedia.
Well, I've told you, I've told you perfectly clearly what I mean by transgender, right? A transgender person is someone whose gender identity and sex differ. Now, do you have an argument?
We can't measure that empirically. Like, that's meaningless. That doesn't mean that's like saying they have the wrong level of midichlorians.
Do you have an argument that actually shows that if someone's gender identity and sex differ, they are delusional?
There's no such thing as gender identity.
No, we just established that there is, IHIP, right?
How did we establish that?
Do you agree that there's a set of characteristics that are typically associated with one or the other sex? behavioral characteristics, psychological
behaviors are gendered, but that's not the same thing as saying like a person has a gender identity.
Yeah, gender just refers. We're talking about gender, right? Just gender broadly. We're not separating into expression and identity and stuff like that. We're just saying gender, and that refers to that set of traits that's typically associated with one or the other sex, roughly, right? So we're talking about psychological traits. We're talking about expressive traits like maybe how they dress or their vocal inflection. You know full well that there's a set of traits that are typically associated with being one or the other sex. Right? Do you deny that?
No,
okay, so you agree that what's being referred to by gender is coherent. Now, do you have an argument that if someone's sex and gender differ, they are delusional? Right? Because the syllogism that we have here says if transgender women by definition believe they are women and it's false that they are women, then transgender women are delusional. Now, they don't require a belief there, right? As long as their gender identity and sex differ, then you're talking about someone who's trans. So and there's additional problems.
No,
obviously.
You're not.
One second.
For
everyone who's listening, right? I'm of course bullshit. And for everyone who's listening, I'm of course aware of the other problems here, like he's equivocating on gender and sex. There's other issues there. I'm just picking out one particularly blatant issue, right? Which is he's assuming.
Listen, here's the problem with what you're saying.
He's assuming.
Here's the problem.
He's assuming that transgender people actually have to have a belief that they're trans. They don't. If their gender and their sex differ, they're trans.
Okay, Isaac. So we agree that there's such thing as you can have an idea that there are certain behaviors that are gendered. Like wearing a dress is a more female behavior. Women tend to wear dresses.
Are you going to give an argument? I'm looking.
Yeah, listen. I do.
What's the argument?
So if a man wears a dress, then he's doing a female gendered behavior, but that doesn't mean that he has a female gender identity, and it doesn't mean that he's trans because he wears a dress. There's no such thing as gender identity.
We're talking about gender.
In order to be transgender, you have to believe you're the opposite sex.
No, you don't, but that's an additional problem, right? Right now, I'm just zeroing in on one extremely basic problem with what you're saying here, which is that you're assuming that transgender people have to have a belief that they're transgender. You could be transgender and not know that you're transgender. There's a whole, don't you think people kind of sometimes discover this about themselves?
You can wake up one day and decide you're transgender because there's no empirical. In transgender, it's just a delusion. You can decide one day, hey, I have this delusion.
You could be delusional about not being transgender. Also, just pointing that out. You're assuming in your premise one of the syllogism, which, I'll post it again here, double syllogism, we formalized your argument for you. You're assuming in premise one of the first argument that transgender women have to have a belief, right? They have to believe that they don't. They could be wrong about the fact that they're trans, right? They could even have a belief that they're not trans and be delusional that they're not trans. What qualifies you as trans is having a gender and a sex which differ. There's not a need for them to have a belief about being trans. So your premise one is just straightforwardly false, and I'm asking you for an argument that doesn't assume that transgender people have to have a belief about being trans. And that's to set aside the other problems about how you're equivocating.
It's in the definition. You're acting as if transgenderism is some kind of empirical thing that people are born with or that exists in their brain or whatever, but there's no way that you just decided that's what it is, but there's no proof of that. There's no evidence. There's certainly no proof.
Do you actually have an argument, IHIP, that shows that if someone's gender identity and sex differ, then they are delusional?
There's no such thing as gender identity. That's not a real thing.
This is the
so
third.
Wait,
1 second. We've been through this. We've been through this.
This is,
I think, the third time now. First of all, gender identity. That's going to be some like subset of gender. We're just talking about gender broadly, right? Now, when you say, if you try to say that gender is incoherent, you've already agreed gender is coherent. You understand that there's a set of characteristics that are typically associated with sex, physiological, or we can have psychological characteristics. We can have expressive characteristics. That's what gender is, okay? And if your gender differs from your sex, you are transgender. Your premise
so if I put on a dress, I'm transgender. That's your position. If I put on a dress, that makes me transgender. I don't have to believe that I'm not. I just have to put on a dress.
Your premise one,
by your definition.
Your premise one assumes that transgender people have to have a belief about being trans. They don't. A transgender person is someone whose gender identity and sex differ. Can you
Your
deliver,
definition of gender identity and trans
can you deliver,
anybody who does something
deliver,
that is like not strictly within their gender is trans.
Can you
so
deliver,
everybody is trans in your world.
Can you deliver an argument that establishes that someone is delusional in virtue of having differing gender identity and sex?
Sorry, say that again?
Can you deliver an argument that shows that someone is delusional in virtue of their gender and sex differing?
So sex is something that we can empirically measure. There's no way to say this person's gender is not matching up, because gender, you can't measure gender. It's not a real thing, dude.
We've already agreed it's a real thing. You understand that there's a set of characteristics that are typically associated
characteristics that you can say are more feminine or more masculine. But Isaac, you understand that if a man puts on a dress, that doesn't make them transgender. Do you understand that?
And those characteristics, 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 and those characteristics,
Isaac, do you understand that a man putting on a dress doesn't become transgender by virtue of putting on a dress? In order for a man to be transgender, the man has to identify as a female.
And those characteristics are what we're referring to when we use the word gender. You agree the characteristics exist. Now, do you have an argument that shows that if someone's gender and sex differ, they're delusional?
Do you have any evidence that you can determine what a person's gender identity is?
Do you think that's an answer to the question? What is the argument, IHIP, that if someone's gender and sex differ, they're delusional? Right, we extracted a first syllogism set from
gender. There's no such thing as a person having a gender.
We already established that there is by gender.
No, I agree that behaviors can be characterized as being more masculine or more feminine. That's what I agreed with.
Look,
I didn't say that means a person has a gender.
I'm going to try to walk you through this. Do you understand that your first premise assumes that transgender people have to have a belief about their gender?
Yeah, by definition, a trans woman is a man who identifies as a woman.
Now, I'm telling you that whatever you're attacking there, it's sure not what I'm referring to by transgender. Transgenderism is when someone's gender and sex differ. Now, do you have an argument that shows that someone is delusional in virtue of their gender and sex differing?
Isaac, there's no such thing as a gender differing from sex. We're going in
circles. We've already established what a gender is. We understand it's coherent.
Can you answer my question? Can you just answer my question? Are you capable of telling me, does a man become transgender when he puts on a dress?
Your objection.
Is that your definition of transgender? Is a man who does anything which is not considered culturally masculine?
Your objection to what I'm saying is to say there's some kind of problem with the notion of gender. Now, when I walk you through what gender means...
It's more the way you're using it. It's the way you're using it is incorrect.
When I walk you through what gender means, you tell me, oh, that's coherent and that exists, right? So there's no going to, oh, gender is incoherent, or gender doesn't exist, or you can't have a gender, right? You agree it's coherent. You agree it exists. Now,
you're making leaps, though, from what I agree with.
Okay, wait. Well, then let's clear that up. Do you agree that gender exists?
No.
Oh, so you
it's a social construct, or whatever they say.
Oh, great. So you don't agree that there's a set of characteristics that are associated with being one or the other sex?
It's not an empirical thing you can measure. Like, it's not scientific.
That's not an answer. Do you agree that there's a set of characteristics associated with being one or the other sex? We're talking behavioral characteristic.
Yeah.
Great. That's gender. And do you agree that you can have one biological sex and have the gender, that is to say, those characteristics typically associated with the other sex?
You don't have a
Can
gender.
you? Yes or no, IHIP?
I reject the idea that you have a gender.
Can you have, what we're referring to by gender is that set of characteristics typically associated with sex.
So putting on a dress or having tits isn't a behavior. So you can get plastic surgery to have tits, but that doesn't mean you have a gender.
It's like arguing with it's not like arguing with a complete moron. It is arguing with a complete moron. IHIP. You understand what gender refers to. You understand that a male can have the gender, right? That is to say...
No, you don't have a gender. You don't have a gender.
Well, by having a gender, all we mean is that you engage in those behaviors. You have those traits that are associated typically with a given sex.
First of all, I wouldn't use that definition, but even if I go by that definition, then that doesn't mean you would be transgender by doing that, because that's not what transgender means.
Transgenderism is having a gender that differs from your sex. So if you have
people don't have genders.
Oh, well, do they have the traits that are typically associated with one or the other sex?
Maybe generally speaking, you could say that, but
great. So they have genders. Now, if someone's gender,
that's like it's just a choice, basically.
If someone's that's irrelevant. That's irrelevant. If someone's gender and their sex differ, then they're transgender, right? So when you
can't measure gender, you can't measure it.
Listen.
It's not the same. You can measure sex, right? You can test for sex. You can't test for gender. No such thing.
Listen, you fucking moron, okay? Try to get your stupid little brain around this. It's really not that hard, okay? Transgenderism that's referring to the phenomenon of having a gender and a sex that differ. When you make an argument that transgenderism is a delusion, but your argument, setting aside all of its other problems, like the gender-sex equivocation, only targets a subset of trans people who have a particular belief about their gender, you're not showing that transgenderism is a delusion. It's like if you try to say cars suck and you give a really long screed about how you don't like Volvo. Do you think that that's established that cars suck?
No, that's not right at all, because you're just using a made-up.
Oh no, that's a perfect analogy, right? And the reason that the analogy is perfect, IHIP, is because you are delivering a syllogism which targets a subset of some group and tries to establish something about them.
No, that's wrong. That's wrong.
Oh, wait, so you're claiming that all trans people have to have the belief that their gender and sex differ.
Yeah, by definition.
No, you can be trans without knowing that you're trans. So you're talking about something else to me.
I reject that.
Right.
That's not
so
true.
Can you actually
prove that it's true? How would you determine? How does somebody else? So you think somebody else could determine that you're trans for you? Is that what you're telling me?
No, I'm saying there's a fact of the matter. Now I'm asking you.
So you think that being trans is a factual, like something that exists in like physical reality?
Absolutely.
That's like a fact about people.
Yeah, there's a fact of the matter, right? Now, what
leads to that belief? How do you reach that conclusion? How do you reach that conclusion?
Just 1 second. What is this? You should unmute Darth since he thinks trans people are delusional. Is Darth in here too? Okay, well wait. Maybe Darth and IHIP can go after. We can let that happen.
No. I'm not talking to that fucking guy.
Okay. Oh, okay. But anyway, so what we're talking about right now, right? You have delivered this double syllogism, okay? I'll post it again. I think I have it here. Yeah, okay.
What led you to the belief that being trans
IHIP, do you
How did you reach that conclusion?
Listen, you fucking idiot. Do you care about having a sound argument, an argument that's valid and has true premises, or do you just want to believe your fucking conclusion for no reason, you fucking idiot? Do you want a sound argument or not?
You're the one who doesn't have a sound argument.
Do you want a sound argument or not?
Do you want a sound argument?
Do you want a sound argument or not, you fucking moron?
Isaac, do you want a sound argument or not?
Do you want a sound argument or not? Do you want a sound argument, you fucking idiot? Do you even know what it means for an argument? Hey, IHIP, what's it mean for an argument to be sound, you fucking moron?
That's if you can hear it with your ears.
Hey,
right?
IHIP, what's an argument being sound mean?
That's what you can hear.
Hey, IHIP, what's an argument being sound mean?
Isaac, are trans women women?
What's it mean for an argument to be sound, you fucking idiot?
Are trans women women?
What's it mean, IHIP? You don't even know. You don't know the first thing. You don't know the first thing about logic, which is why you do not give a shit about having an argument that's actually sound. Right? Now, if you would like to understand what soundness means, it refers to the combination of validity, which I've helped you with because you're incapable of spelling out a valid argument, and true premises. Now, I grant you that the form is valid. It is modus ponens. P implies Q. P, therefore Q. Now, I am taking issue with your first premise, okay? The issue that I'm taking, although there are plenty of other issues to take, is that you are not targeting trans people as a category, okay? You are targeting a subset of the category who have a belief about their gender. You don't require that belief in order to be trans. So, do you have a sound argument that establishes that someone is delusional in virtue of their gender and sex differing, you fucking idiot?
Are trans women women?
Do you have an argument that shows that someone is delusional in virtue of their gender and sex differing?
Are trans women women?
Do you have an argument that shows that someone is delusional in virtue of their gender and sex differing?
There's no such thing as gender.
We've already been through this, IHIP. We've already been through this. We understand. We understand that there's a set of characteristics that are associated with one or the other sex. We've been through it, so you don't get to say that, oh, I have some problem with the notion of gender. You want me to walk you through it again? Are there characteristics? Are there characteristics associated with one or the other sex?
Isaac.
Are there Hey, IHIP, are there characteristics associated with one or the other sex? Yes or no?
Sure.
Great. That's what we're talking about with gender. Okay. Now, can those characteristics differ from the biological sex?
Oh shit, someone said something funny in the chat. Can you tell me how you reached the conclusion that
can those characteristics differ from the biological sex?
Like, can a man wear a dress? Is that what you're asking me?
That would be one of many of those characteristics.
Yeah, but that doesn't make the man transgender.
Great.
That's not what being transgender is.
That is what I am referring to by transgenderism, which is when your gender and your sex differ. Okay? Now, I'm asking you to deliver a
wearing a dress doesn't make you a woman.
I didn't claim that.
Wearing a dress doesn't make you a woman.
You're strawmanning me. You're strawmanning me down to saying that.
No, I'm not. That's what you're saying. That's exactly what you're saying.
Yes, you are. You are strawmanning me to saying that.
That's the reductio of what
you're
saying.
Strawmanning me into saying. You're strawmanning me into saying that one gender characteristic determines your gender. I did not say that. If someone,
so you have a methodology for determining
has a gender
what is your methodology for determining gender?
If someone has one gender characteristic,
methodology for determining gender.
If someone has one gender characteristic which goes in the female direction and all of the others go in the male direction, we're not going to say that they have a female gender. So you're strawmanning me when you say
now you're claiming
you are strawmanning me. You are strawmanning me when you say that my position is that someone is trans in virtue of wearing a dress. Now listen to me. Now listen to me, you brain dead. Listen to me, you brain dead fucking idiot. I want you to deliver a sound argument that establishes that someone is delusional in virtue of their gender and sex differing. Can you do it? Yes or no?
Isaac, I think.
Can you do it? Yes or no? I am giving you one more chance. Can you deliver a sound argument that establishes that someone is delusional in virtue of their gender and sex differing? You have one shot to give a yes or no answer. Yes or no?
I need to know the methodology for determining someone's gender.
You're fucking
fucking gone, iHip. Have a good day.